and welcome to the Varietal Show. If you've never been here before, well, thank you for coming in and giving it a shot. I'm just going to, very briefly, read you a little introductory text for the story we're going to build on tonight, and then I'll describe how everything else works. Argo's phone buzzed a few minutes ago, but he assumed it was work, so he ignored it. The phone won't buzz again, but when Argo reaches home in 12 minutes and 53 seconds, he will check his phone. He will first respond to a friend's message sent several hours ago, during work hours, with a cartoon face laughing so hard that tears are streaming from its pie-shaped head. He will not have laughed, of course, but that's not the point. Then you'll look at the other message, now sent 16 minutes and 12 seconds ago. It will tell him, you have 12 hours to get there. 12 hours, then the choice is yours. Don't be late. Received at 6:55 p.m. The message will have an attached GPS tag. Argo will run his hand over where his hair once grew, then crease his brow. When he clicks it, you will see it tags some nowhere place deep in the exclusion zone. It's well past the crumbling and ruined guard stations. It's out where no one has dared repair the roads. He will respond quickly with each question that forms in his head as it does so. He will want to know who it is, but there will be no response. He wants to know where it is, but there will be no response. And he will want to know what choice he has to make, and to this a response comes. Terror. To be tardy is to choose terror. To be on time is to choose however you will. To stop what comes or see it born upon the world. So don't be late. Received at 7:04 p.m. Argo will text threats and skepticism, but it will not respond. There will be no more texts, and after a long day of work, his old phone's battery will flicker out. It will be 7:33 p.m. when Argo puts his vehicle in reverse and heads for the city gate. It is what happens beyond those borders we shall unravel. From there into the void of a ruined country begins the story of Argo's drive. And if you are watching this live, then you can join the live chat. And once I explain how the mechanics of this game works, you can start pitching ideas and so on to help us formulate whatever it is Argo is doing here. This is just sort of a stinger to give you an idea, because that's what we're doing here. This is a ride-along stream where we basically try to formulate a story using random prompts in chat and myself and so on. And in particular, we're going to play a game called Chill Out today, which is an adaptation of Alone Among the Stars. And I will tell you a bit about it when we get there. I'm taking my own vibe on it, which is a little more Twin Peaks and a little less chill out. But if you are here, just know my chat, which I've come to regard as a very special collection of potatoes, as I call my creative starch. And if you don't know what that means, I don't know a clearer way to explain it. But you can join in there. It's a friendly crowd. And we will work out the story together. However, if you're not watching this live, the one major advantage you have is you can skip over the parts that you don't care about. You can go down into the description below, and there will be timestamps as to like when we start writing and what the final result was and so on. And you can jump ahead to whatever section most interests you. If you do want to play this game yourself, it's on itch.io, and I will have that in a pinned comment below. But let's talk about the game then. I'm going to have a drink of water, and then we're going to talk about the game. And since I have a moment here, hello, Tammy. I hope those swelling glands get unswollen. I see Witchery is curious about Into the Void and says they modded a 7-hour stream for someone. I am my own mod. I fear the day that I'm going to have to figure out some other option, should that ever come to be necessary. If you don't mind me asking, what was the stream about, Witchery? If you do, just don't answer. Uncle Kitty says 6 tornadoes touched down nearby their hometown. I hope they don't touch down anywhere near you. Nearer, I suppose. And Zombie Wolf is here, saying they made it. Good. Okay, let's talk about this game. All right. So the game we're playing tonight is called... Well, this part of the show is called litgames, which stands for literature games, or there's like 50 other names you could know them by. There's solo tabletop RPGs, lyric games, solo journaling games, so on. Mostly indie games out of itch.io. And if you are... Oh, I know what's happening. I was like trying to figure out why my sound was off. I know why. Because I had my noise canceling on, which deepens and loudens everything. Okay, now it sounds normal. Anyways, we're going to play a game like that. We're going to specifically play a game called Chill Out, which is an adaptation of a game called Alone Among the Stars, which is a game we've played various adaptations of before. The short version of Alone Among the Stars is you need a deck of cards, and as you draw, all you really do is you just draw cards, and based on the number, and based on the... What is the general term for this? Suit, I guess, of the card, you will get pretty open prompts. And I'll show you what they are for this game in particular, which is a game about driving from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. through the night to somewhere, which is why our intro addressed it as such. Do you know Eric Campbell? I do not, but I do know Geek and Sundry somewhat. It was his 4-year streamiversary today. Aw. Witchery says, usually my Friday is reserved for you, though. Aw, well, that's nice. Nobody needs reserve for my goofy little show. Anyways, I've already done this kind of setting up, but this is the most important page in the document. You see how it gives us the card suits are like hearts would be buildings like gas stations, diners, and tourist traps. Spades would be like road signs and billboards. Oddities and unexplained mysteries would be diamonds. And clubs are sort of natural things, whether that's farms or whatever else. The number on the card then gives us a sort of a word about that. So like if we had an ace of hearts, we might say it's a spooky gas station. If we had a 9 of clubs, we might say it's a encouraging something natural. Maybe it's encouraging to see a farm or something like that. Now you might notice that these are not prompts that are very prescriptive, and that's kind of the strength of Alone Among the Stars. And that's the point of the game. It's a game about creativity. So if you're a person who just likes sort of grinding through mechanics, this is probably not the stream for you. Because mostly what we're doing here is we're using this as a prompt for writing, which I think is fun. And I'm going to assume the people in the chat who keep coming back to this think it's fun. So maybe you will too. I don't know. Nonetheless, that's the game. The gist of it, though, is that we are traveling across somewhere. I've sort of set it up in a semi-apocalyptic scenario, like sort of later on enough that most stuff is rebuilt, but there's areas that are not, and I'm being asked to be pushed into somewhere haven't gone. In the original setup for the game, they want you to take a map and sort of like find a path. Like a real road, but I don't see the need for me personally to be doing that, so I'm not going to do that. Witchery, oh well, I've angered the chat. I should probably not antagonize my fans for liking me. If fan is the right word, I don't know. But Witchery says, no, I arrange my Friday around being here. Well, it's very sweet of you to do so. Hopefully I earn that time. Tammy says, Rory, your live stream is something I look forward to every week. Well, that's very sweet. I'm glad you guys enjoy it. That's the point. I sort of started this, especially during a time when, for reasons of COVID and stuff, I wasn't seeing some people that I normally see. And it was a way to sort of maintain a contact with them and reach out to other people in that situation. And so it's always been my aim to sort of welcome you to the game table, if you will, for people who enjoy writing. Zombie Wolf says, Rory, if you're not a person. Me, was that a reference to me? Oh, I welcome the wolves. Okay. Witchery says, how else am I meant to bother not just you, but the rest of these nerds? Should I change the catch line for this whole channel to bothering nerds? Okay. I don't want to screw around. One thing I'm going to say right now, I've sort of given you the intro. Argo gets this mysterious text. He's told to travel across to a random place in what I've called the exclusion zone, which is my reference to a sort of semi-ruinous country. We'll decide on what that looks like and how ruinous it is. Obviously, we're going to have to find some surprisingly occupied areas and stuff like that. We're going to figure out this world together. I don't want to be full apocalypse, but I do like the idea of a sort of ruined area. I'm not really looking at it as an exclusion zone for radiation. I don't know what it is yet, though. I want to go weird. I want to be like Twin Peaksy here. Funny is fine. You know, we'll do what we do. But the thing I do need to say is that if you're new to the stream, unfortunately, I'm probably never going to get to the end of this in the stream. It is meant to take place over 12 hours, and every time you draw a card for each hour, you add the value of the card together with the next one until you equal the value of that hour or more, which means that we could be drawing quite a few cards over this, and the way I work is it doesn't take much of a prompt for me to write like 5 pages of prose, and that's most of the time we have. So if you're coming here to figure out what the choice will be, we probably aren't going to get that far, but that doesn't stop you from doing your own fan fiction about how the story ends, which I completely endorse. I'm going to take the jokers out because I don't think this needs the jokers. I didn't think to check. Zombie Wolf says a question every furry has struggled with. I'm sure. LMAO. I mean, I'm not a furry, but I have never understood people who make their whole life around hating furries. I just don't understand that instinct. Seems fun, I suppose. Uncle Kitty said, my PC crashed. Did I miss anything? You've never missed anything. Besides, Rory doesn't have room to fit whole stories in. He'd break Google Docs. Okay. So this is done by the hour. I've said that he's left about 7:30. So we'll say that 7:30 to 8 will be the first one. Then there will be 8 to 9. And then we'll see if we can get further than that. One thing the game does do that's interesting that I forgot to mention is it has sort of scripted segments every 2 hours. Scripted as much as a game like this could be. I just don't know what else you could say for it. Like 9 p.m. dusk is falling fast, and then it gives you a more specific scenario, and when you draw the cards, they have a bit of a different prompt to them. So that's interesting, I think. I've not seen that in a hack of Alone Among the Stars. Okay. Just shuffling cards in my incompetent way. I'm not a capable shuffler. Also, I know, obviously, all of you guys like a lot of tabletop games, but if you guys are also into other forms of games, and this is one of your games, happy Final Fantasy Day. You can't really see it. I don't know if it shows up better if I turn off the light. I mean, it kind of does. This is a drawing of Midgard, and Cloud is watching it. But I unfortunately won't be playing for a while because I do not have $100 to spend on a video game right now. But I have heard that the reviews are very good. I really loved the first game. I don't think I actually finished Intergrade, but just the DLC. I did enjoy it. I can't remember what got me off track, though. Okay, first card is a 5 of Hearts. Let's see what that does. A 5 means it's a nostalgic. So we're still close to the city walls at this point. It's possible he could have some nostalgic areas, places he wasn't supposed to go as a kid or something. And a heart is buildings like gas stations, diners, and tourist traps. Okay. Well, he's just left after getting sort of weird comments. He's driving on the better condition roads because the ones closest to the city, I'm assuming they've repaired from whatever sort of war or weird event has occurred. I still haven't really decided what caused the damage. But it's still a place that we would regularly see abandoned buildings. So the question comes, Zombie Wolf says, my brother was great at shuffling cards when we were younger because he played a lot of cards. Games like Uno, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Magic the Gathering. He also played poker with his friends. I tried to play poker with my friends, and it doesn't work nearly as well as people say it does, because basically it winds up with 2 people playing cards. I prefer games where it either is a rapid turnover or everyone's involved for longer. I didn't really like playing poker. Anyways. So, what nostalgic place when he leaves the gates of his city in this semi-post-apocalyptic, somewhat futuristic city do we think he should see? The road was smooth. For a good mile. Outside the gates. The city was always expanding, reclaiming the ruins about it. And Argo was still reaping the benefits of that work. He knew it would ooh, that's a cool one. Witchery, I like that. I think I'll use that. Argo was still reaping the benefits of that work. He knew it wouldn't last long before the reclamation had reached this far. He used to sneak out with his friends and drink hooch from an old gas can. Dirty and sour liquor. Still, as he rounded the bend. What's a term for like very black? I'm trying to get that feel of like an unused, newly paved road of asphalt, like a not obsidian. I feel like that's an overused term. GS says, can we have a offensive McDonald's mascot along with the arches? Yeah, sure. We can have all the ruins of it. I spent about 7 or 8 years writing a post-apocalyptic story that was sort of set, I would say later on from this, but far enough that it would make reference to these old things that they didn't recognize. And it was the fun part of writing that. And if you're curious, like what happened to it, it's just how stories go. Sometimes you realize that it doesn't work in the middle of the second act. Just the logic of the story just doesn't pan out. As black as pitch. Pitch is good. Stygian is a good one as well. Pitch is probably more informative because pitch is what it is. Effectively. Like it's not literally pitch, but it is tar. I've not used Stygian as a black, though, descriptor, and I think that's a great idea. Sooty. Yeah. I do like these words. I'm gonna probably pull them and use them elsewhere. I'm gonna use pitch now. I know it's not the most flourished, but yeah, Stygian is not one I would have thought of. Still, as you rounded the bend of a pitch. Wow, pitch black is usually used to describe the night, isn't it? That might be confusing. These are the thoughts that I don't normally vocalize, but are at the core of writing. If you want to know what goes on in a writer's brain, this is it. Maybe we will use Stygian. Maybe I need to stop overthinking it. Maybe that's the right answer. Bend of a Stygian road. Painted with fresh yellow paint. It's a terrible sentence. Fresh yellow stripes. Painted with bright yellow stripes. There was barely even... No, I'm getting off track. We're not describing the road. Still, as you rounded the bend of a Stygian road, painted with bright yellow stripes, he saw that twisted bed of vines I don't know why I'm being so picky today. He saw where... I think I'm just overthinking everything. He saw the ruined and half-buried golden arches where such liquors were imbibed. I guess spirits? We're talking about how Grimace is an eldritch whore. There is a part of my soul that wants Grimace to be an eldritch horror in this to be just a stupid horror story. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if that's where this goes. He saw the ruined and half-buried golden arches where such spirits had been imbibed. Jumpstore says, I don't think H.P. Lovecraft could have made a more terrifying creature such as Grimace. I don't know that he even really made terrifying creatures. I think he made more. Like, I think what was interesting about him was his existential horror. At the end of the day, it wasn't really the individual creatures. I don't know that anybody's really scared of old Cthulhu here, but I feel like what he represents about the cosmos and your place in it is where the horror was. So that's what comes to mind to me, because I'm not sure how much. I think he real wanted his monsters to be horrifying. I don't know that they were. I think Stephen King was better at that as sort of the heir apparent to H.P. Lovecraft's project. If you didn't know, I mean, he's very Lovecraftian King. It was wound up in thorny vines now, clearly untouched in as much as a decade. But as he passed it in that thick, deciduous forest, he couldn't help but taste lipstick and smell fumes. He checked his map. I guess he doesn't have a map. I didn't really think that through. He turned. He slowed the car for a moment and let it idle out there. That's just another voice in the choir of cicadas and owls. Time was slipping away, though. So he turned out onto the old highway, still lined with rusted and ruined cars, and began to travel the broken roads. Jumpstore says, I feel like existential horror when I leave to go to work. I don't need H.P. Lovecraft to make a personification of that for me. I think that's the brilliance of it, is that it's something more. It's more on that level. It's that very quiet. I remember when I was like 13, I had a dream. For a long time, I dreamed in black and white for whatever reason. I had a dream. Keeping in mind, I'm in like high school age here, very young. I had this dream that I just was like 30, which seemed old at the time. and I had some friend that was fine as a person, but I wasn't that close to. But we were like both single, and it was like, well, I haven't found anybody. Maybe we should get married. And so in the dream, I just got married. It was a really simple little ceremony. And then the dream ended with me sitting in black and white on stairs of the back porch of my house and just feeling dread. Which is, by the way, insightful on the fact that my dreams tend to be French existential films, apparently. Jumpstore says, I've ever heard of Shub-Nagroth. Yep. It's one of the better stories. Just a basically undulating blob of mouths. Yes, this may be a guy dressed up in a grimace costume waving as though business as usual. That's not a bad idea. Let's see if we get a prompt that invites that. So the way this works, as I recall, so we're at 8 o'clock. I've drawn a 5. I need to draw another card till we hit 8 or more. Jumpstore says, I love Lovecraftian horror, but his books are just so uncomfortable to read. He's not a great writer. It's because I mentioned the cats. That's why that one got named Rory. What? I missed something. Did you name a cat after me? So we got a Jack, which I guess is like an 11 or a 10, depending on how you want to look at face cards. But Jack of Diamonds. Let's see what that says. Oh, you're talking about Lovecraft's cat. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, the guy was a dickhead. A lot is made of that, and rightfully so. But I should say, in the grand scheme of, like, what was going on in that time, he wasn't even half as bad. I feel like that's a good enough reason to not want to have anything to do with his writing, because it's definitely all over his writing. Some of his most famous stuff is clearly just anxiety about people being different than him. Yeah, I'm always cautious about people that make too big of a deal about individual moments like that, as opposed to just the whole systemic problem of that time. Like, one nerd in his books was nothing compared to the laws. You know, he has real it's better not to look into him as a person. He has real, like, incel vibes. Oh, I said at least he didn't name the monsters like he named the cat. Yeah. I think that probably would have screwed him earlier on for any sort of thing. Thomas Ligotti, I don't know. Anyways. I guess what I'm trying to say is I think the problem isn't that he names the cat that way in that one story. The problem is, for example, one of his more famous tales is about fish people in the sea, but it's pretty blatantly about the horrors of race mixing, right? Like the systemic problems are the more concerning thing for me than individual moments, if that makes sense. Anyways, we have a Jack of Diamonds, which means a diamond is an oddity and an unexplained mystery. So that works into GS's thing. And a Jack is ominous. Okay, I'll see if I can try to work this in naturally. The old car was not made for the crumbling blacktop. It was a city car, reclaimed and refurbished. But cheap. The stutter. Nope. The shuddering of every pothole and crevice of the blacktop. Of the ruined highway? Of the ruined highway. Was painful. Oh, we're talking about Nietzsche? I know a ridiculous amount of Nietzsche. That was one thing I did a lot on in my degree. Also, kind of a jerk. But then, I'm sorry to tell you, pretty much every philosopher was. But a person who was willfully misunderstood by his own family. And that led to a bunch of problems later. Witchery says, Rory are well-read king. I'm not well-read. But I did read a lot of philosophy. I realized, I always feel like I have to clarify this, because if psychology stuff comes up, I'll mention I majored in psychology. And if philosophy stuff comes up, I'll mention I majored in philosophy. And it starts to sound like I'm lying about one or both of those. But the truth is I did a double major because I would rather do more work than make a decision. Jumpstore says his sister caused a lot of... Yeah, his sister and specifically her husband were virulent anti-Semites, and he openly hated the man. Talks about it all the time in Beyond Good and Evil. And, but the thing is like, he is an elitist. That's true. But he also spends literal chapters of his books talking about how much he hates anti-Semites, mainly because he thinks they're sort of weak-minded and whatever else. He's not a noble person at any point. But then what happened was, when he went mad and spent 10 years in a home and completely didn't know what was going on, his sister default got all his work. And they recognized that he offered a sort of elitist philosophy that they could use, but they needed to take out some of the parts that made them look really bad. And so what it wound up happening was a bunch of edited versions and translations of his works that pulled out all the critical stuff about, things like the Nazis. What became the main impression that the West got of him, because he was mostly only known in Prussia at that time. Schopenhauer is mentioned there. He did really like Schopenhauer, but he had more optimism than Schopenhauer. Everyone has more optimism than Schopenhauer. Okay. It was a city car, reclaimed and refurbished, but cheap. The shuddering of every pothole and crevice of the ruined highway was painful in this heap that was breaking itself apart. I remember the summary that I got of Schopenhauerian philosophy from my philosophy teacher was that it was a philosophy that concluded you should probably kill yourself, but you won't out of spite to life itself, which isn't wrong per se. I think it's lacking some nuance about Schopenhauer, but it gives you an idea of how bleak that man is. This heap that was breaking itself apart with every mile. Argo let his mind wander. Uncle Kitty said, yeah, that's Arthur, lol. Yeah. Although I gotta say, after reading the introduction to Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit, I think I understand why that man was in such a bad mood all the time. And that is this stream's new segment, Rory's Philosophy Inside Joke. Do you feel left out? Good. That's the point of every stream, is to make everyone feel left out. Jumpstore says, I don't think I've heard of Schopenhauer before. Yeah, there's a philosopher and composer that come kind of in the similar era, so they can get confusing, but... Argo let his mind wander into to more memories of his youth. That old restaurant. The one that smelled of mold and earth. Back on the bend behind. Was where he met his wife. Uncle Kitty says, no, I'm just very curious. I'm always impressed to people that can pick up philosophy without the courses. I don't think I could do it. The trouble with trying to read philosophy is that it's effectively a conversation that has been going on for 2,000 years. And it's not even that you need to be particularly smart or anything like that, but they'll respond to stuff that if you don't know it, they're completely dense and inaccessible works, right? Like, it's impossible really to understand Beyond Good and Evil, Nietzsche's work, unless you've read Kant. And you can't really understand Kant unless you understand the divide between idealists and materialists. Shut up, computer. It's a thing with the monitor. I don't know. And you can't understand the idealists and materialists unless you read like 6 people at minimum. And you can't understand that unless you read some of the old medieval philosophers. And you can't understand those unless you understand the Greek philosophers. And then, you know, you see the problem. Jess trying to get me back on track. Good call. Argo let his mind wander to more memories of youth. That old restaurant, the one that smelled of mold and earth, back on the bend behind. That abandoned restaurant, not old. Yeah, Machiavelli's been traditionally misunderstood. I don't know that it's strictly speaking satire, but I will say that, you know, it was originally sent to try and persuade someone against being a tyrant. That abandoned restaurant with the arches, the one that smelled of mold and earth. Was where he met his wife. They were drunk. As the dew began to settle in the early morning. The rest were asleep in the car, and just them were digging through the ruins of a lost society. One only their grandparents knew. Tammy says, I hate to brag in chat. I have to brag in chat. My son just got him and I tickets to see Kane Brown in concert in August. So very excited. Had to tell everyone, especially I feel. Oh, congrats. I don't know who that is. I'm sorry. The most memorable thing they found, which formed their first and most lasting in-joke. Was a big purple thumb or blob with eyes. Seemed to be a mascot of sorts. It was holding a cheeseburger. Most of the paint had worn off. Witchery says, I have a modest proposal. And I don't know if that's them asking permission to give proposals, or I think more likely is a reference to one of the most famous pieces of satire, which is titled, among other words, A Modest Proposal, which is a satire meant to highlight how cold-hearted Victorian, I think it was, era society was about the poor, and proposes that they should start eating children as satire. Tammy Morelli says, Kane Brown is a country singer. Really good. He sings all different kinds of songs. Well, I do like country, but not much on the pop side. The most modern country singer I listened to was Hank 3, which was Hank Williams' grandson. Though did find out many years later he was kind of a jerk in I guess not surprising ways, but he does a sort of mixture of... He does like that rebel country thing, I guess, is the best way to put it. Right. That was holding in cheeseburger. Most of the paint had worn off. But there was enough to imagine its big, goofy eyes looming over its ever-widening violet body. Argo even smiled a bit, thinking of it. It reminded him of better times. It reminded him of her. it distracted him, though. From that, some approximation of that weird old mascot walking across the ruined and abandoned highway. He struck for the brakes, but was too late. Slid right over the gravel and through the wide-eyed purple creature growing brighter in his headlights. Thump and crash. It's somewhere behind him. The car stops. He gets out. The creature is moving. Tammy says he does a little rap and pop and of course country. He sings the song My City for the Fast and Furious 10. Oh, it's been a long time since I've seen Fast and Furious. Hey, what happened to my window? It rolls back, then forth, each time gaining some momentum and groaning and gargling in this guttural way that he had always imagined it would. He stepped carefully forward, stopping when it gained enough momentum find its footing and stand up. Witchery says, can we talk about the fact that McDonald's ever felt it was a good idea to call a children's mascot Grimace? Everything is confusing about him. I assume this Grimace came from the Mad Men era of advertising where everyone was drunk or something. I've heard descriptions of what he personifies, and it made no sense to me. Maybe that's something somebody else can look up. It turned towards him. Those wide, dead, cartoon eyes piercing through the darkness. On an outstretched hand, it held a burger of too perfect a form to be food. In a uneasy and distant voice, it asks, "Did you want to supersize that?" Witchery says he originally had 4 arms. What? Okay, well, obviously I've made a mistake, and my attempts to make this an emotionally involved road trip was the wrong move. We need to just make a Grimace horror story. Tammy is talking about the Winnie the Pooh horror series. I haven't seen it. I can't say I'm really that interested in it, but there was a lot of hubbub online about how it was like a bad thing. And you know me around here, I'm not a big fan of copyright, and I'm a big fan of public domain. I really don't see how it does any real harm to Winnie the Pooh. You know, I don't think most people watch it, and those who do, if they enjoy it, then hey, there you go. Witchery says, I don't know if this link will go through, but probably not. YouTube really doesn't like links. I don't know what that means, Argo said with a quavering voice. He had seen it on that old sign him and his wife dug up, but Witchery says I sent it, so I guess not. Yeah, I don't know. You can tag me on Mastodon if it's something you want me to look at. I can't look at it in the stream, but what's the problem? I want to say quivering. There's pictures of old Grimace. Oh. Yeah, I mean, I think the expected outcome is you're probably not going to like it. Because it doesn't look very good. But, you know, if at some point somebody likes that and then spins it off into something else, I mean, that's the genesis of new ideas. It's how we get out of everything being a sequel and a universe, right? Which I'm not as resentful as other people with, but some of the things they're doing. It's just people trying to diversify the intellectual property they own, like real estate, and I just don't think it's very effective for creativity. The purple monstrosity then turned and began walking away down the road, down the broken highway. It disappeared into the dark. Yeah, so like here's the only point I'm gonna make on this. Jumpstore and Zombie Wolf and Tammy and stuff are talking about how it made them laugh, and the people in the theater were laughing, and whatever else. And to me, that's enough evidence of the value of public domain, right? Like, no child is being taken to see Winnie the Pooh. You'd have to be an absolute moron to think it's the same. You know, that's why we have rating systems and stuff. It brought people some joys. All right. Argo wanted to go home. He did not understand what he had seen and assumed he was hallucinating. However, the purple burger monster was that way. And though it may sound silly to one not to one in a cozy home hearing of the tale much later, to Argo, out there alone in the cold night, in silence, he witnessed a monster. This sentence is a mess. That even a speeding car could not injure. He was not about to travel in its direction. And so he turned the car, so he carried on the way he was going, checking the mirrors more than he ever had. Witcher says, I got taken to see Priscilla, Queen of the Desert when I was 4. My mom freaked out. About what? Nothing really goes on in that, especially to a 4-year-old. It's just a bunch of people singing. It's a great movie. All right, let's look at... So this will take us to 9 o'clock. We've already met Ghost Grimace. I bet she didn't know how queer I was. Or maybe she did, and maybe that was why she freaked out. She was like, no, don't approve of it. I mean, I don't know your mother. I'm just spitballing. 9 p.m. Dusk is falling fast. So, I mentioned before they have sort of like cut scenes. See if I can get this all the way on. Yeah, I can. So we're at 9 p.m. Every 2 hours they give us this, and here is our cutscene. Well, on your drive, you hear on the radio that the road had been blocked off up ahead by an accident. So here's the problem. Because I'm not really playing this game the way in the world that it was designed for, that makes no sense here. So we, collectively, chat, need to figure out what this could mean for our version of the world. Allegedly, she was told we were going to see the Flintstones movie. There's true horror there. So, while on your drive, you hear on the radio that the road has been blocked off up ahead by an accident. You stop at a gas station to refuel and ask the gas station attendant for directions. Then we draw a card to see what kind of directions we get. So how do we interpret that? I didn't say that this place is fully abandoned. They just don't know who's out here. How do we make this work? I guess the easy thing would be skip the radio part, because that doesn't really work here. Or we could do it even weirder. I mean, sort of phantom radio signals works. Yeah, why don't we do that? Why don't we just, his radio kicks to life and gives a report that couldn't be true. The clock on his radio, on his car radio, flicked over to 9 p.m. Witchery says, I don't know, Rory. Sorry, I'm distracted by wanting to watch Priscilla again. Just, and then he's passed by Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. I didn't mention at the beginning of the stream, but I think I might be getting sick again because my partner was sick again and tried to avoid it all week. I hope that's not the case. But if it is, hopefully it's better than last time. Possible radio transmission. Everyone likes a radio transmission. Okay. This surprised Argo for several reasons. It's a boring intro. Let's do this. Argo wasn't one to watch the clock, but he watched it turn over to 9 p.m. because it sputtered to life with a hiss and a voice. I will admit that some of my inspiration, I haven't played it, but I watched a bit of people play it, was Pacific Drive, which is a game that came out and looks very cool, which is arguably this game that we're doing right now. Again, I didn't watch more than like 30 minutes of it, but I got the gist of it. You drive around in a car and weird stuff happens, and I think that's a really compelling premise. So I'm sort of using this game that way. I meant to mention that at the beginning, actually. Tammy says, so we were talking about Happy to Your Friends and I went back and watched them. Jump Store says, I like the idea with the radio because they're on to Alistair, who is the radio devil in Has Been Hotel. Because it sputtered to life with a hiss and a voice, despite being way too far from the city's broadcast towers. The hiss cleaned. His cleaned. His died. Died down to a perky broadcaster's voice, backed by old time techno. Who said, watching traffic build for about 2 miles from the 5th interchange because of an earlier accident involving a semi-truck recommended to take the 128th exit and loop around. This broadcast brought to you by then it hissed again and went silent. Witchery says, I feel like I have to watch that show just to work out what everyone's going on about at this point. You'll know, like, within an episode if it's for you. Like I said, for me, it's a mixed bag. I can see why it's popular. It's not like incompetent or anything like that. It's just very aggressive and loud, and it wants you to know that, well, it is taking Disney tropes and Disney princess stuff and making very clear that they're not like Disney, right? Like, it's a lot of that. Yeah, I might have to agree with Jump Story there. I'm not sure what I would say if somebody said I was like Alistair. Like in voice? Because any kind of a wicked thing? Before me was the shells of rain-beaten cars blocking every lane of the highway. The broadcast was some phantom of a long time past, but oddly was still accurate. Argo took the exit. It led to mossy piles that were once homes, framed by cracked sidewalks almost blue in the rising moonlight. Somewhere near the end of this road. This road. He saw a small shop lit by flickering oil lights. Someone sat out front, drawing on an orange ember. Argo had no idea how to get back on the highway. And when the man sitting outside in the moonlight waved at him, Argo knew he had no choice. Pulled the car up, rolled down the window, and said, "Hello." Nice night we're having. What do you think the guy should say back, chat? I don't really have a clear idea of what to make of this character. We're complaining about Disney. Now, before we go blaming writers for Disney, let me explain why there are so many sequels and why they are just rehashes. First of all, I should just say, narrative is always rehashing. Who said hi first? We did. But second of all, you got to understand that the properties you're discussing, whether it's Disney's version of Snow White or whatever else, they're not creative enterprises. They're not looking at those and asking themselves, how can we add to it creatively like a writer might? What they're doing is they look at them as basically real estate. They own pieces of real estate. And when a business owns pieces of real estate, they will have sort of their main way they make money off that chunk of real estate. But they're going to want to diversify. And so when they go and they sit in their meetings, they say, well, we got this Snow White thing and we've been reselling the discs for, 100 years or whatever. Not literally, but close to it. But, is there a way we can add in a little side shop that doesn't make as much money, but could make a little bit more money off of that property? And they say, well, we could do a live action one. We could do this thing. In other words, it's the same as a person who has like a farm going like, well, we could set up a corner there where we rent some parking for people that go to the game across the street or whatever else. Or, we could set up a little thing in the corner where, in the summer camp for kids or something like that. Ways of like creating more income from the same property. And then when they know that's what they want to do on a financial level, then they find writers and they tell those writers, these are the points you have to hit. You've got to be live action. It's got to hit this audience that we feel like is underrepresented. We want to get them to this piece of real estate. I think that's the important thing that I see missed in discourse about sort of bad sequels and worlds. It's not driven by lazy artists. It's driven by the Wall Streetification of all of cultural property. That's basically what copyright enables people to do, is to take chunks of copyright of cultural property, put a bunch of gates on it for about a century. And that's why, for example, you have someone like Sony who bought some property with Spider-Man and has this motivation on top of just their contract not expiring if they don't make a movie for it, but they have this motivation to just keep making stuff because they have the property. It would be a waste to not use it. You and I and everybody else looks at it as, what was the creative merits to creating this prequel, this sequel, this universe movie? This is not the start of these ideas. This isn't where they come from. These are not ideas put together by artists. They don't go to a room full of artists and ask them, do you want to do a live action remake? They don't. They say, there's money in it. We can make it for this much money and we can sell it for this much, and we know it. We're going to diversify that property. And then, like little mercenaries, they come to writers and say, you need to do this. It's visible if you want to see it. But yeah, I mean, there is a temptation to rag on artists, but understand they are not consulted for the first ideas. They are given scripts and things, and they are told to make something happen. Whether it's we feel like we're not getting enough Gen Z in theaters for our movies, and so you need to update Beauty and the Beast for millennials or whatever else, right? Like, it's all very cynical, done purely from an investment and diversification standpoint. And even if it does badly, it's still bringing in more money than just the same old movies. And if you don't like that, that's not a problem with creativity in the modern era. That's a problem with capitalism. Anyways, speaking of Bing doing nothing with capitalism, let's get back to this. GS says, smoking guy could say, if you call fill in the blank nice and make it refer to a disaster from the past. 2-year drought nice. Oh, I see what you're saying. Oh, that's a good idea, Jess. I like that. I'm going to take that principle. Hello, nice night we're having. It's a... It used to be louder, he said with a bit of a frown. Louder? Like more people were here? Yup. More birds, too. He leaned forward. And with a bit of a slur. Continued. You're the first thing I heard. Besides the wind. Quite a few days. Witchery says down with Bob Iger. I mean, yeah, fair enough, but it's systemic, guys. This is a systemic issue. You swap out Bob Iger, you'll get some other version of it. The problem is they own your culture, and the people who would make good things with it can't. Well, in my opinion, I suppose. You're the first thing I heard besides the wind in quite a few days. Did they just migrate or something? Witchery says he sucks personally, though. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I'm not defending Bob Iger here. I'm just encouraging people to consider the system these people exist in that enables them, if nothing else. Did they just migrate or something? Witchery says, every stream I hate on Disney, but I am such a Disney fan, it's a complex relationship. I think it's pretty straightforward. Disney represents some of the most vibrant creativity of the last century that occurred almost in spite of the conditions that were nurtured on it on a business level. You can always love the work of artists and not associate it with the structures, business structures around them. Did they just migrate or something? I asked out of curiosity. Drought. Drought got the birds to leave. Because the bugs all shriveled up. He said with a sigh. Uncle Kitty says, I feel that way about horror films. I love the genre, but some of the writing conventions are frustratingly stupid. What are some examples, Uncle Kitty? I'm always down to talk writing. Then folks got sick. Started disappearing off into the woods. Sick? Why would they disappear when they were sick? Yeah, I gotta agree, Tammy. it's not that there's no merit to like a live action remake, I suppose, but I don't think I was ever gonna like them because I just prefer animation. I think a lot of the things that I've heard like said about them, I don't know. I think they don't. A lot of the points made I don't really care about, but the just the fact that it's not animated, I don't know. There's just less interest in it for me. Why would they disappear when they were sick? Ever After is the best Cinderella, indeed. Sick. Why would they disappear when they were sick? I asked. He looked at me. With bloodshot eyes. That were black and yawning voids. And just said, I don't know, but it's how it went. There was a long silence, during which he leaned back into his chair at a rate slower than any leaning has ever been done. I don't know. Jess says, the modern French live-action Beauty and Beast is incredible. Do you know the name of it, Jess? I've not heard of it. Well, I'm trying to get back on the highway. Oh, hey, do you run a radio station? I asked. No, but you hear them old signals out here sometimes. Usually right around before things broke. In the old days. Best not to dwell on them, is my recommendation. No one knows why they're still around. Zombie Wolf says, sorry, Witchery, The Lion King is a ripoff of the anime Kimba and the White Lion. Everyone knows that. It has a lot of similarities. They're not the same thing, though. Tammy saw the Broadway Lion King show. I've never understood how that works on Broadway. No one knows why they're still around. Jump Store says the plots are certainly similar. Yeah, but it's also Hamlet, so like it's. I guess what I'm saying is, don't help corporations gatekeep. No, Disney is in no place to be ripping people off because obviously they're litigious and whatever else, but it is not the same story. It just has structural similarities. That's not unusual, is all I'm saying. Best not to dwell on them is my recommendation. No one knows why they're still around. No, but you hear the old signals. Jumpstore says if it was truly Hamlet, everyone would have died at the end. I mean, yeah, it's not truly Hamlet, but it's a lot like it. That's all I'm saying, is like artists use these various structures and ideas as like jumping off points and whatever. Obviously, what do we remember about Beauty and the Beast? And what do we remember about Lion King is the songs and the animation, which neither of which comes from that original anime. No one knows why they're still around. Does not dwell on them. No one knows why they're still around. Uncle Kitty says, once you review enough of them, I think talking about horror stories, you can point at one and predict, oh, Hershey's the one that will fall down and die. I see what you mean. Yeah, it's like romance in that sense, where it has its tropes, and if you deviate too far from it, you lose these like core fans you're trying to attract, which is a shame because it stagnates the format. Which I guess is also true of the Pokemon games, up until Arceus. The old man said, then pointed left and said, follow that to a curve, and if you're in the mood for taking advice, don't turn around. It's probably already following you. Argo face soured at that, and he said, what? What's following me? If I knew, I would tell you. The old man said, Argo then realized that the old man had been picking up his stuff, but so slowly he barely perceived that was happening until he stood and folded his chair. He said nothing else, but Argo watched him retreat into his shop and roll shutters over every window. Uncle Kitty says, as a kitty, I had to learn to, as a critic, I had to learn to express my own feelings on a film. To answer the question, well, a fan of this genre of the feel screwed are happy if they pay $10 to see this. I liked what's the word I'm looking for? I liked Roger Ebert's approach where he tried to he rated films in terms of like, yeah, their genre, but also just what they were trying to achieve. Because I feel like there's not really an objective measure for films or any art. Hierarchies of art are almost entirely rooted in fascism, by the way. If you folks want to find some videos on it, the one I recommend is Who's Afraid of Red, White, and Blue or something like that, by I'll get his name later. He's an essayist on YouTube. Who's Afraid of Modern Art? That's what it's called. Is the name of the essay. Anyways, that explains the roots of it. So then the only way you can really judge art is in terms of like what goals was it trying to achieve and did it. So like in horror, it's like, you know, like you said, if it's a genre horror film, it's trying to satisfy people that like that comfort. I did read the original Beauty and the Beast on the channel some years ago on Fireside Fairy Tales. It doesn't give you nearly as much about the Beast as the Disney movie does. If anything, the Disney movie tries to give the Beast a bit more of a motivation than the original tale does, but it's also the original tale is wouldn't have worked well in a movie, I'll say that. Witcher says I need to run, but I'll catch up later. Yeah, it's okay. I'm wrapping up here anyways. Okay, I gotta stop it there. If you're coming to this part of the show, it's because you just want to know what we wrote. We were playing a game called Chill Out, which is an adaptation of Alone Among the Stars, rather. And it's about driving from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. to some great distance in your car. Now, the original one is set as a sort of chill night drive. I took it in a slightly different direction. I did a little more David Lynchy kind of thing that, well, you'll see where it goes. We obviously didn't get to the end of the story. That would have been several pages and a lot of card drawing, but basically we would draw cards and get prompts and write around them. So here's what we came up with. Argo's phone buzzed a few minutes ago, but he assumed it was work, so he ignored it. Now, the phone won't buzz again, but when Argo reaches home in 12 minutes and 53 seconds, he will check his phone. He will first respond to a friend's message sent several hours ago during work hours, with a cartoon face laughing so hard that tears are streaming from its pie-shaped head. He will not have laughed, of course, but that's not the point. Then you'll look at the other message, now sent 16 minutes and 12 seconds ago. It will tell him, you have 12 hours to get there. 12 hours, then the choice is yours. Don't be late. Received at 6:55 p.m. The message will have an attached GPS tag. Argo will run his hand over where his hair once grew, then crease his brow. When he clicks it, the GPS He will see the GPS tag some nowhere place deep in the exclusion zone. It's well past the crumbling and ruined guard stations. It's out where no one has dared repair the roads. He will respond quickly with each question that forms in his head as it forms. He wants to know who it is, but there will be no response. He wants to know where this is, but there will be no response. He wants to know what choice he has to make, and to this a response comes. Terror. To be tardy is to choose terror. To be on time is to choose however you will. To stop what comes or see it born upon the world. Don't be late. Received at 7:04 p.m. Argo will text threats and skepticism, but it will not respond. There will be no more texts, and after a long day of work, his old phone's battery will flicker out. It will be 7:33 p.m. when Argo puts his vehicle in reverse and heads for the city gate. It is what happens beyond those borders we shall unravel. From there into the void of a ruined country begins the story of Argo's drive. The road was smooth for a good mile outside the gates. The city was always expanding, reclaiming the ruins about its walls, and Argo was still reaping the benefits of that work by driving upon those smooth roads. He knew they wouldn't last, though. Long before the reclamation had reached this far, he used to sneak out with his friends and drink hooch from an old gas can, dirty and sour liquor. Still, as he rounded the bend of a Stygian road painted with bright yellow stripes, he saw the ruined and half-buried golden arches where such spirits had been imbibed in his youth. The location was wound up in thorny vines now, clearly untouched in as much as a decade, but as he passed it, in that thick, deciduous forest, he couldn't help but taste lipstick and smell fumes. He slowed the car for a moment and let it idle out there as just another voice in the choir of cicadas and owls. Time was slipping away, though, so he turned out onto the cold, old highway, still lined with rusted and ruined cars, and began to travel along the broken roads. The old car was not made for crumbling blacktop. It was a city car, reclaimed and refurbished, but cheap. The shuttering of every plot hole and crevice of the ruined highway was painful in this heap that was breaking itself apart with every mile. Argo let his mind wander into more memories of his youth. That abandoned restaurant with the arches, the one that smelled of mold and earth, was where he met his wife. They were drunk as the dew began to settle in the early morning. The rest were asleep in the car, and just them were digging, just them two, I guess, were digging through the ruins of a lost society, one only their grandparents knew. The most memorable thing they found, which formed their first and most lasting in-joke, was a big purple blob, a big purple thumb, a kind of blob with eyes. It seemed to be a mascot of sorts that was holding up a cheeseburger in a permanent pose. Most of its paint had worn off, but there was enough to imagine its big goofy eyes looming over its ever-widening violet body. Argo even smiled a bit thinking of it. It reminded him of better times. It reminded him of her. It distracted him, though, from some approximation of that weird old mascot walking across the ruined and abandoned highway he was driving upon. He struck for the brakes, but slid right over the gravel and through the wide-eyed purple creature growing brighter in his headlights. Thump and crash, it's somewhere behind him. The car stops, he gets out. The creature is moving. It rolls back, then forth, each time gaining some momentum and gargling in this guttural way that he'd always imagined it would. He stepped carefully forward, stopping when the creature gained enough momentum to find its footing and stand up. It turned towards him, those wide, dead cartoon eyes piercing through the darkness, and on an outstretched hand it held a burger of too perfect a form to be real food. In an uneasy and distant voice it asks, "Did you want to supersize that?" I don't know what that means, Argo said with a quavering voice. He'd seen it on that old sign him and his wife dug up back in memories. But what it meant was lost to time and to him. Then the purple monstrosity turned and began walking away down the broken highway. It disappeared into the dark. Argo wanted to go home. He did not understand what he'd seen and assumed he was hallucinating. However, the purple burger monster was that way, and though it may sound silly to one in a cozy home hearing of this tale much later, to Argo out there alone in the cold night and silence, he witnessed a monster that not even a speeding car could injure. He was not about to travel in its direction, and so he carried on the way he was going, checking the mirrors more than he ever had. The clock on his car radio flicked over to 9 p.m. Argo wasn't one to watch the clock, but he watched it turn over to 9 p.m. because his car radio had sputtered to life with a hiss and a voice, despite being much too far from the city's broadcast towers. The hiss died down to a perky broadcaster's voice backed by old-time techno who said, "Watching traffic build for about 2 miles from the 5th interchange because of an early accident involving a semi-truck. Recommended to take the 128th exit and loop around. This broadcast brought to you by..." Then it hissed again and went silent. Before me was the shells of rain-beaten cars blocking every lane of the highway. The broadcast was some phantom of a long time past, but oddly remained accurate. Argo took the exit then. It led him to mossy piles that were once homes framed by cracked sidewalks that were almost blue in the rising moonlight. Somewhere near the end of this road, he saw a small shop lit by flickering oil lights. Someone sat out front drawing on an orange ember. Argo had no idea how to get back on the highway, and when the man sitting outside in the moonlight waved at him, Argo knew he had no choice but to speak. Argo pulled the car up, rolled down the window, and said, "Hello, nice night we're having." "It used to be louder," he said, the old man said with a bit of a frown. "Louder? Like more people were here?" "Yeah. More birds, too." He leaned forward with a bit of a slur and continued, "You're the first thing I heard besides the wind in quite a few days." "Did they just migrate or something?" I asked out of curiosity. "Drought got the birds to leave, 'cause all the bugs shriveled up," he said with a sigh. "Then folks got sick, started disappearing off into the woods." "Sick? Why would they disappear when they were sick?" I asked. He looked at me with bloodshot eyes that were black and yawning voids, and just said, "I don't know, but it's how it went." There was a long silence, during which he leaned back into his chair at a rate slower than any leaning has ever been done. "Well, I'm trying to get back on the highway. Oh, hey, do you run a radio station?" I asked. "No. But you will hear them old signals out here sometimes. Usually from right around before things broke in the old days. It's best not to dwell on them, is my recommendation. No one knows why they're still around," the old man said, then pointed left and said, "Follow that to a curve, and if you're in the mood for taking advice, don't turn around. It's probably already following you." Argo's face soured at that, and he said, "What? What's following me?" "If I knew, I would tell you," the old man said. Argo then realized that the old man had been picking up his stuff, but so slowly he barely perceived that was happening. Until he stood and folded his chair. The old man said nothing else, but Argo watched him retreat into his shop and roll shutters over every window. Argo suddenly only felt his heart. He pulled the car in gear and drove on. So I don't think you have to go that way with it. I mean, obviously the original game is more about just sort of seeing cows and sheep and commenting on them. It's probably more just prosaic. But that was the way that I interpreted it. A little more moody. All right. Talking about cliffhangers. People want to see my hair. Sure. I don't know. There's a great way to... There you go. Jumpstore says, where's the fun in commenting on cows and sheep? Unless those cows and sheep are chasing your car in the form of terrible mutants. All right. Well, we'll see how I feel as the days come, because like I said, I think I'm getting sick. There is a chance, though, that even if I feel well, there might not be a Varietal Show next week. There's a friend's rather significant event is going on, and I think I'm going to try and see it. I might put up something regardless. I usually try to put up something just so that people, you know, feel remembered, I suppose. I don't really know. I don't know for sure. Obviously, keep an eye on the channel. It'll let you know. Yeah, beyond that, this was a long one. It was a long one because I kept getting myself distracted. It was my fault. Zombie Wolf says, random trivia. So ancient Roman roads can actually heal themselves due to mineral deposits called lime class. That's very cool. Gia says, I prefer the moody. Yeah, I do like moody writing, but as you can see, it's hard for chat to engage with moody writing. I will acknowledge that. The other thing I was thinking of doing tonight, which I'll probably do next time, I mean, no promises, but as I was thinking of returning to that little fox one we did around Christmas time, and doing something about sort of spring thawing. Because I did really like that game, and I feel like I'd only touched on a few mechanics. So we'll see. Tammy Morella says, it's holy cow, it's long. Yeah, so I got it cut before the pandemic, like a couple of months before. And my hair is really hard to cut. And so when I find someone who can do it, I stick with them for a long time because almost everybody does a bad haircut with it. And then after the pandemic went on for so long, I lost touch. She left the place that I knew her at. I couldn't find my barber again, and then I just sort of let it grow. And now it's gotten to this point. Zombie Wolf says, when water enters the concrete and dissolves calcium bits, they recrystallize. Yeah, I think that makes sense to me. All right. Well, you don't have to go home, but of course you can't stay here. That goes for all my beloved potatoes, such as Tammy, Jumpstore, Witchery, Uncle Kitty, GS, Zombie Wolf. We didn't see Genera tonight, so Genera, if you watch this later, thanks for watching. And I think that's all of them, and me, I suppose. I can't stay here. I gotta go home. So get out of my shop.